10 banned episodes of popular kids shows. In this video, you are going to see Homer Simpson with a gun, an abortion on Family Guy, violence and guns and gargoyles, and so much more, starting off with Tailspin and working our way up to some of the craziest kids' TV episodes that were banned. Let's start with number 10, Tailspin, Flying Dupes. Disney is famous for recasting their characters in many series, and this time it was a spoof of Baloo, Louie, and Shere Khan from The Jungle Book. Tailspin is located in Cape Suzette. It is a place that quite resembles San Francisco, California. With Baloo as its hero, the Disney series that transported the animal stars of The Jungle Book into the world of commercial air travel couldn't be too serious. However, one Disney-banned show had far too many issues to count. Baloo delivered a bomb to a foreign leader's residence in the final episode of the series, hoping that the subsequent conflict would mean big profits for bomb makers. Baloo had no idea he was trying an execution, but the terrorist motifs and carriage of a bomb on an airliner alone make it difficult to imagine it ever flew. Consequently, Disney had to remove the program indefinitely promptly. Moving on to number 9, Sailor Moon, Day of Destiny. The storyline of young girls transformed into warriors was an instant sensation and had a great audience when it arrived in America, but adding English voices wasn't the only adjustment made while bringing Sailor Moon from Japan. Audiences may not have recognized that Sailors Neptune and Uranus aren't just buddies, but there is something steamy. They are lovers in the original cartoon. Other countries came up with some unusual alternatives rather than dealing with a lesbian romance in a cartoon. For starters, they cut or denied to telecast shows focused on their courtship. In America, the couple was referred to as cousins, which made their romance even more disturbing. However, in Russia and France, Sailor Uranus' civilian form was supposed to be a guy, with Neptune posing as his girlfriend to keep their superhero identities hidden, even after employing a male voice actor for the role. Moving on to number 8, Arthur, Room to Ride. Sometimes a storyline thread or star surprise makes sense at the moment, but real-world circumstances conspire to make it an uncomfortable dilemma for broadcasters to address. In this children's show, Binky seeks encouragement from a trusted expert when Arthur decides to tackle the subject of cycling on city streets using the Tour de France champion Lance Armstrong. For those who don't know Lance Armstrong, he is a former American road racing professional cyclist. Considered as a sports legend for 7 consecutive times the Tour de France from 1999 to 2005. A few years later, Armstrong admitted to using illegal drugs and was robbed of his 7 championships. It was probably in the show's best interest to ensure that the episode reflected the verdict, even if it meant depriving him of a cameo to top it all off. Moving on to number 7, Dexter's Laboratory, Dial M for Monkey. Dial M for Monkey is Dexter's Laboratory episode that stars Dexter's pet lab monkey, the commanding general, the agent Honeydew, who possesses superpowers and fights crime with them. Dexter wanted his pet lab monkey to have a weird character, but he never discovers any of it. But when Dexter isn't looking, the monkey transforms into a superpowered monkey named Monkey, who fights crime and wickedness when all other forces have been defeated. Although Monkey has a segment, he has appeared several times in Dexter's Lab segment. In the Dial M for Monkey portion, apart from the story of each episode in the Dexter Laboratory, comic book superheroes were the highlights of the broadcast. It seems controversial to be this episode starring Silver Spooner. It wasn't the appearance of a drunk Hulk or even a ripoff of Marvel's Galactus, but the fact that Silver Spooner was one long joke on gay stereotypes. The authors may have felt it was bright, but it was never shown alongside the other episodes. Moving on to number 6, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Conflict. Mr. Rogers' District ran longer than most when it came to children's TV series. It is a novel show. As a kid, you value the show, mock it when you grow up, and again appreciate it as an adult. In the show, there were many good arguments to be made by Fred Rogers. He is one of the most nuanced depictions ever to television screens of non-toxic masculinity. The 5 programs were centered upon providing children with a brief lesson in the Cold War and the paranoia and dread that helped eradicate it during the 1983 broadcast. The Good Friday King was a curious item presented to Corny the Beaver to suspect him of accumulating nuclear arsenals. The Good King Friday was a curious item presented to Corny the Beaver to suspect him of accumulating nuclear arsenals, and terror exacerbated the issue. The metaphor worked, but the topic was just too scary for children to deal with, and Mr. Rogers never told the tale. Moving on to number 5, Cow and Chicken Buffalo Gals. This animated cartoon called Cow and Chicken was absolutely nasty. His siblings, his hyperactive second-grade cow, and his hot-tempered fifth-grader chicken have repeatedly been in trouble to demonstrate that they're making people laugh and not a moral guard. A few of his allies are Officer Pants Offski, Mrs. Bear de Rear, Major Wedgie, and No Pants de Leon, among which his nemesis is Red Guy, which may well be the devil. But the character was most notable for not carrying trousers. All the so-called jokes were too harsh to enjoy. The censors did not want to break a limit, and Cow and Chicken discovered this in 7 solid minutes of lesbian jokes. Buffalo Gals, it was not enough. That's frankly the whole episode. A motorcycle gang of tattooed ladies who burst into the residence of the family and gnaw on the rug. One is called Munch Kelly. Softball jokes also included, and in the end, undoubtedly, it was banned. Moving on to number 4, Seinfeld, The Puerto Rican Day. In this 1988 episode of Seinfeld, the troupe was stranded in the traditional Puerto Rican Day parade in the early escape of the Mets game. After a bright sparkler has unintentionally lighted a Puerto Rican flag, Kramer stomps in the blazing flag and is mobbed by the crowd of Puerto Ricans, who finally toss Jerry's empty car down a stairwell. It was inappropriate to the Puerto Rican National Coalition that the flag be used as a prop at all, and Bronx Borough President Fernando Ferrer, a fellow Puerto Rican, protested vandalizing a car. Kramer commented that it happens in Puerto Rico every day. Although NBC apologized for the program, the Puerto Rican Day was not featured in the original broadcast packages, but only in the final series. However, the program began to be broadcast on several networks in 2002. Moving on to number 3, Gargoyles, Deadly Force. This Disney TV cult classic is another illustration of how attempting to educate kids on a lesson can end up upsetting them more than it helps. Gargoyles has a devoted fan base mainly to its rich narratives, excellent graphics, and dramatic storytelling from its initial release in 1994. Playing on the premise that violent movies and computer games glorify violence and gunslingers, a not-so-bright member of the Gargoyles Broadway discovers that guns aren't toys, in the most frightening and distressing way conceivable. Broadway accidentally shoots the group's human friend Eliza while messing with the service weapons. Parents and protest organizations were justifiably outraged that their children witnessed a popular cartoon hero shoot a lady and place her in intensive care. Deadly Force was pulled out of the rotation for a period, followed by rotational broadcasting by spin-off networks Toon Disney and Disney XD. However, the professionals remain proud of this episode's message on gun violence and stand by it as an insightful discussion of guns and misuse. Moving on to number 2, Family Guy, Partial Terms Endearment. The 21st and final season of the animated cartoon sitcom Family Guy were entitled Partial Terms of Endearment and had a huge controversy on the topic of abortion. The episode calls Lois to become a surrogate mother for her old college pal. Lois agrees and undergoes in vitro fertilization after a disagreement with her husband Peter, who is against the conception. Although Lois is now pregnant and in a car crash, the biological parents die. Peter and Lois must determine whether the fetus will be aborted or taken to a term to allow the infant to be adopted. Peter and Lois plan to attend the local facility for family planning to determine and eventually terminate the embryo. But when Peter goes out of the center, he meets a rally against abortion, where one of the demonstrators presents an anti-abortion film. Peter tries to discourage his wife from getting an abortion. Ignoring the protestations of Peter, Lois conducts the abortion. Due to concerns about the contentious subject of abortions, the program was prohibited from broadcast on the Fox network. Now we move on to the moment you've all been waiting for. Number 1, The Simpsons, The Cartridge Family. The 5th episode of The Simpsons' 9th season is The Cartridge Family. It was the first broadcast on the US Fox network on the 2nd of November 1997. After a lackluster match between Mexico and Portugal, a football riot breaks out in Springfield. Marge is worried about the security of her family and encourages Homer to purchase a home security system, but he buys a firearm when he knows it costs $500. Homer exposes his pistol to Marge, who was appalled and demanded to get rid of it. Bart and Milhouse discover the weapon in the fridge's vegetable crisper. Marge sees herself with the gun in a garbage can reflection and decides to retain it. After seeing how carelessly he wields his handgun, the other NRA members expel Homer from the organization. Initially, because of scenes of egregious weapons usage, the episode was not shown on Sky One, the United Kingdom satellite station, but was nonetheless played numerous times in an earlier evening schedule. The show, although somewhat edited, has been broadcast in daytime slots on all networks. Subscribe and we'll see you in the next episode of Stay Wise.